Well, I'm delighted to have Robert Oulds with me of the Bruges Group to talk about a new book that they have just published, 75 Brexit Benefits, written by the mysterious Gully Foyle. Now, tell me, Robert, who is Gully Foyle? I thought it was you.
Well, I can't disclose who Gully Foyle is because he fears for his job. There is so much prejudice out there against people of our persuasion, people who work in various industries, people who are experts and have something really important to contribute can indeed face persecution and dismissal from their job if they raise their head above the parapet.
So he supports Brexit but keeps quiet about it because he's worried about his employment and his economic opportunities.
Very much so,
All
unfortunately.
Right. So you're going to stand in for him and tell me all about this book and the benefits of Brexit. And one of the most important ones, it seems to me, is financial, that the money that isn't going from the UK to the EU anymore. How important do you rank that in the list of benefits?
Well, Britain has a serious financial crisis at this time. It's not talked about enough because I think the numbers are so alarming. But whilst we were in the European Union, if we remained in the EU, we would be borrowing money, not just to keep the lights on and to pay our interest, but also to shore up the financial situation in the EU and other countries who have been even more reckless than the UK. And it's a serious liability that we're facing. And the Bruges Group's led the way in raising awareness about this because we're literally handing over, or were, billions each year to countries to make sure that their financial situation is stable. And if they go bust, their debts would be put on us, which is something we can't afford. So we're outside the EU now, we're outside those mechanisms, and we're safe from the risks that they would pose to us.
Okay, is that right? I thought there wasn't any liability for other EU member states' debts. So when the United States started, one of the major reasons for the federal state, one of Alexander Hamilton's most important contributions to the US, was the federalisation of debt. That hasn't happened in the EU, so we wouldn't be liable for Greek debt, would we?
Oh, absolutely, yes, and we were. There's various mechanisms that they'd put in place, and we were liable. And thankfully, we're now free of that. And it was costing us tens of billions a year, contributing to these other mechanisms. David Cameron falsely claimed that he had taken them out, taken the UK out of those mechanisms, but he hadn't. We still remained in others. And if the EU and other countries in the EU were to go under, the bills would be facing us. But we're free of that now.
But is this going back to the £350 million figure that was on the bus and actually wasn't a completely solid figure? How sure are we that these figures are accurate, well audited, not just propaganda against the EU?
Oh, well, this is on top of the 350 million figure, which is, of course, a week which the EU would have control of. And so this is more, there's way more that the EU is costing us than just the figures on the back of that.
So this is the 800 billion euros of COVID reconstruction loans that have been taken on by the EU and which the member states are jointly and severally liable for.
And other mechanisms.
And other
well.
mechanisms.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's many mechanisms. It's a very complicated situation that the EU's tying us up into, or tried to. Thankfully, we got out, and this is a real big boon, and it means that money that we do have in the UK, we can keep in the UK for our own interests.
And so that's the major, biggest benefit. What about trade? Because we have got a more restricted access to the EU market. What have we been able to do on trade instead? And does that counterweight the loss of access to the EU market, or have we sold a mackerel for a sprat?
Well, we're still selling into the European Union single market and its customs union, just as we're importing from them. We still have a trade agreement with the European Union. Plus, of course, we have the other trade agreements with other nations around the world. And we've managed to negotiate more. We're negotiating, we've managed to achieve agreements with India, Australia, a better deal with the United States, which is absolutely crucial than that which the European Union has. Plus, for those who are buying products on the supermarket shelves, we've got cheaper prices. We removed tariffs on things that didn't make sense, such as we had tariffs in place that were protecting European Union growers of oranges. We don't really have much of an orange industry in the UK.
Somerset grows the most beautiful oranges, but not enough of them.
Not enough to supply Britain's
Yeah.
tastes. And of course, we were supporting France's colonies in the purchase of bananas. This is not, but meaning paying higher prices when, of course, we should be getting cheaper market prices, cheaper world market prices, and of course, supporting those countries in the Commonwealth who've stood by Britain for, particularly in the last century, and those countries that we have traditional alliances with, and it's meant cheaper prices for people in the shops because we've removed nonsense European tariffs that defend industries we don't simply have in the UK.
So the cheaper food, clothing and footwear that I argued for in the Brexit campaign, that is now coming through, even though we've had inflation. So how do you divide it up between the inflation that we've had post-COVID and the reductions in prices that we've got from removing tariffs?
Yeah, well, we did have excessive inflation in the UK, but it was still lower than that which existed within the Eurozone. And of course, the reason we had inflation was because we had lax monetary policies. We had the government splurge of finance due to COVID, excessively low interest rates for too long, and quantitative easing, which pushed up prices. And it did. We had a lax monetary policy, but it was worse on the continent. So yes, we have had a lot of challenges to face, but those challenges were less severe because we're outside of the European Union.
And what about our own farmers? Our own farmers have found life very difficult since we've left the European Union, and it seems that this government doesn't really care about farmers. Were farmers actually better off under the Common Agricultural Policy?
Well, no, the most wealthy landowners really benefited from the Common Agricultural Policy. The monies were going to those who had the most land, those who were already the richest. But of course, it really didn't help farmers that much. It just inflated prices for them. Now we have a far better agricultural policy that is tailored to specific farms and particular interests to help the environment. So we have a much better environmental policy in the UK now.
But do we? I mean, we have a different policy, but is this actually better? I'd argue that our current agricultural policies, our environmental policies, I think are bonkers.
In terms of the land that we have and making sure it's responsive to the environment, and it that we have policies that actually enable farmers to invest into improving the land for the environmental benefits rather than.
But wouldn't it be better to make food?
Well, what we need to do is there's always improvements that can be made, but a lot of our food can come indeed from abroad, which we can get at cheaper rates now.
I mean, I may be slightly putting words in your mouth, but are you saying that we may have bad policy, but it's our bad policy and therefore we can change it, whereas it used to be the EU's bad policy and we couldn't do anything about it?
It's a better policy than the Common Agricultural Policy that the EU is forcing on us, and we can make changes. There's always going to be improvements. Brexit will always be a process where we're looking to move forward and see what works and try new things. But we certainly have a better situation, I think, for farmers and the environment, which I think the British people do care about.
There are some things I read in this book that almost turned me into a Remainer, if not a Remoniac, that you said we could now do because we've left the EU, that I'd hate us to do or that we've done and are very inconvenient. So one of them is the banning of foie gras. I like foie gras very much, actually. Tornadoes Rossini, one of my favourite dishes. And VAT on school fees, which is costing me a fortune with 6 children in private education. So are you telling me if I want my foie gras and I don't want VAT on school fees, I should have voted to remain?
Well, one of the key things that we need to explain to, and this is important to the book, is to explain to people who were opposing Brexit, who may have been in the Labour Party, may have joined the Labour Party, for instance, to get Keir Starmer elected in the hope that he would bring us closer to the EU, is that it actually gives Britain more control. And that may be policies that some people may not like, but it's about the choice that we have now as a country to move forward. And I think that's very important. And those who are traditionally on what's called the left should definitely be supporting Brexit. But leaving perhaps your own personal taste for foie gras aside, is that there's a big win. One thing that really marks the British people out for, I think, those on the continent, is we are very much animal lovers. We're a nation of animal lovers, amongst other things, and that really defines us. And that's one of the big wins from Brexit. Both the British government and indeed the Scottish government have introduced legislation which has been a good big win for the environment and for animals, be that the banning of live animal exports, the supporting of rare birds around our coastline. There's been policies which have really helped us and protected the environment, as well as I mentioned earlier, but also protected species that are really important in the UK and abroad. And I think the British people need to learn about that, and they need to know about how it's something that really has been very positive. They need to get this book and find out.
And as an aside, geese actually like being fed. It's not cruel to geese to produce foie gras. But there's one thing that seems to come from all of this, that there aren't 75 benefits. There's one benefit. That one benefit is the most enormous benefit. The biggest benefit of all is that our democracy actually functions, and the government put in by the British people can decide how the country is governed. All the other 75 benefits flow from that one primary benefit.
Absolutely. The most important issue is, of course, always going to be democracy, and we have our sovereignty now, and we have the right to make sure our politicians know that the buck stops with them and that they're accountable, and we can make the changes that we want to have happen. Plus, of course, there's also another benefit which is almost intangible. The country's going through a national revival at the moment. We see with the raising of the flag, the Union flag, and of course the St George's flag, people are wanting to celebrate their identity as being British. I don't think that would be happening whilst we were still in the European Union. We have a chance now to have people working for the best interests of this country, which they weren't doing when we were in the EU. They were thinking, what policies can we do that would make the other European countries happy? What can we do to harm ourselves and our own interest, undermine British jobs, give them even more money, which we don't have, to make them happy, to try and seem good Europeans? Now we're working towards making sure we're good British people and making sure that our country's going to succeed.
Well, if we want true national revival, let's watch what happens in Australia over the winter and see if we can win back the Ashes. Robert, thank you very much for standing in for Gully Foyle and for this excellent publication, which is, I hope, available in all good bookshops and from our friends at Amazon. Thank you.
Thank you.